Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. All backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Spotcast, Season 9, Episode 21. My name is Jonathan Kuehlein. I am in Florenceville, Bristol, New Brunswick, Canada. And I am joined, as always, by Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
Good, man. Good to hear your voice. In this crazy world we live in,
Indeed.
It's nice to have something you can look forward to that's normal.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, did you have the craziness of the World Cup pegged this week? Did you make any money?
I didn't do any wagers, but it did turn out where we're sitting here for this recording, the final is set between Spain and Argentina, and that's what I was rooting for. I know I'm a little different than a lot of folks who, I'm not going to deny the questions around how FIFA has handled Argentina. I'm going to put that aside and say, for me, when I tend to look at World Cup stuff, I say, okay, obviously I start with the U.S., and then I go, okay, let's go by heritage. So Mexico is kind of the next team up. Mm-hmm. After that, Spain, there must be some sort of lineage there somewhere. And then for Argentina, I'm like, well, if you accept that there could be a fifth or sixth cousin twice removed or something in Spain, I'm like, yeah, maybe they went to Argentina next, right?
So you're just going to take anything Hispanic that works? That's the follow through? I guess I could do the same thing with with sort of British writ large. I could just start going down the list.
Right, which is why I wasn't rooting against France or England, but I was like, well, there's definitely no family members there. So
fair.
That was my reasoning and logic towards it.
It is nice that it's not two European countries. At least there's some other part of the world that gets to enjoy the last game. So that's something.
Right.
All right, well, let's jump into the show. This week we're going to be talking about House of the Dragon, Season 3, Episode 4. We're going to talk about Silo, Season 3, Episode 2. And we're only 1 week away from the return of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So very exciting that we're going to have a whole summer to be able to talk about that show, which is one of our favorites. So let's kick things off with our fact check. Last week we were talking about Christopher Nolan and the Odyssey and just all of the greatness that he has done. We talked about how The Prestige is going to be back in theaters in January. And Tim flagged for us that there is a festival going on at the TIFF Lightbox in Toronto right now, where they're showing a lot of the films. Oppenheimer and Tenet are showing in 70 millimeter, which is a very cool experience. I've seen those in that format and very, very cool. Prestige is also showing. The following, Memento, Inception, and Insomnia are all playing. So if you are a Nolan fan and want to see those movies in the theater and happen to live in the Toronto area, there's your opportunity. Unfortunately, it's not reaching down as far as I am, but hopefully some of these movies will come. I'm excited to see The Odyssey, but it's about 2 hours and 45 minutes to the nearest IMAX theater too. So I have to decide how bad I want to see it in that format. And even then, it's just the digital version. It's not obviously the giant skyscraper version. But what are you going to do? And last week we were also talking about Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, and I did not do my real-time follow-up of where you can look and find it. I did look on Just Watch, and pointed out that Just Watch is the place where you can find out where things are playing. I did look at it in real time during the show last week, but I forgot to chime back in and say it is not playing anywhere for free right now in the US, according to JustWatch.com. So you have to rent it or you have to wait. But I do highly recommend it. It is a very unique movie, well worth making the effort for. So, or spend the $5. Come on, you cheapskates, get at it. All right, let's jump into the headlines. Starting this week with some sad news, we lost an acting icon, Sam Neill, who was the star of Jurassic Park and countless other films over a career that spanned more than 50 years. Died this week. He was 78. He died of pneumonia, and very sad news. Very kind of I feel like we kind of came full circle with him. He was one of those actors, back in the 80s. He was in some different stuff, and then he had some real breakthrough works. Obviously nothing quite as big as Jurassic Park. That was a monster, but he was in all kinds of movies over the years, and then circled back around and was back in the Jurassic World franchise as they came back around. He was in those as well. So yeah, I mean, big career. I think the first time I really remember him standing out to me was during Hunt for Red October. I remember that performance being very memorable, and the line "I will live in Montana" has always been stuck in my head from that movie. But yeah, I mean, just a huge career, and lots of blockbusters. The Piano. I mean, he's been in Oscar-nominated movies as well. He's done, a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, it was really, really sad to hear about that passing. What are your remembrances of Sam Neill?
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. Jurassic Park, I definitely really is where I noticed him. And then watching or rewatching Hunt for Red October, it's it's the Jurassic Park guy. That's kind of me in reverse.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there was some others like In the Mouth of Madness, and he did some really kind of weird stuff. The one that I saw, I think most recently it was 8, 9, 10 years ago, but he was in one of the earliest Taika Waititi movies, Hunt for the Wilder People, which is a very New Zealand movie, but it is terrific. He's really great in that, and he also later went on to be in Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder in the Marvel universe. So I mean, just again, so many different things over his career, and I mean, this is losing a legend. So very, very, very sad to see him go. The other passing this week that kind of went under the radar and happened at the same time was an actress named Wai Shing Ho. Wai Shing Ho is not a name that you would necessarily recognize right away, but she's one of those faces that you would immediately recognize. She was Madame Gao in the Marvel Universe, particularly the Netflix Marvel Universe. She was the leader of a criminal enterprise in those in the whole storyline that culminated with the Defenders. She was this sort of ruled with an iron fist, if you'll forgive the direct pun, but take no prisoners kind of badass leader of this Chinese gang. And yeah, it was wouldn't necessarily be one of the all-time, she certainly wasn't like a super powered hero or anything like that, but villainous mastermind, playing that part. And again, this is somebody who just had so many roles. She was an actress for a very long time and played a lot of different parts over her career. And I just wanted to make sure she got her due, because she was a big part of that. That if you go back and watch those Netflix shows, Madame Gao is a big deal. She's one of the big bads. Yeah,
it's sad to lose both these folks. Stroke here and pneumonia, I think. I don't know if that article said it, but I did see that on the news.
Yeah. Yeah, and Wai Shing Ho was 82. So again, nice long life, good career, and again, left a lot of great work for us to admire. All right, stepping away from the passings this week. Well, everybody and their monkey has decided to sue over the Paramount Warner Brothers merger. I have 4 different stories here that we will touch on in bits and pieces, and we can talk about there was the group of United States that all sued. That was the first one. So this is 12 states filing an antitrust lawsuit to block the merger, saying that it would ruin competition, it would cost jobs, it would cost consumers in price increases, would increase monopolies over movie theaters, it would reduce the amount of market availability for people to have variety in those spaces. It's a pretty sweeping suit. Then we had the Writers Guild of America suing to block the merger, saying that the deal is also breaking antitrust law because it'll harm wages and working conditions for writers. So that was another lawsuit. Then there was a third lawsuit where David and Larry Ellison, the owners of Paramount Skydance, they were sued by an investor of Paramount, alleging that there is an illegal side deal with U.S. President Donald Trump to secure the approval of the takeover. And so that got filed this week as well. But on the good news for them, a judge did deny a preliminary injunction in another lawsuit that was brought forward by consumers, saying that it would ruin the competitive marketplace because they're talking about merging HBO Max and Paramount Plus, reducing options for people and therefore giving them the viability to increase prices. A judge ruled that their likelihood of that case being successful is too low, and that there is no real injury identified to the people who filed the suit. So they didn't have standing, basically, what it came down to. All of this just adds up to a lot of people do not want this deal to go through, not the least of which are obviously, consumers. But what do you make of this sort of flurry of activity related to this particular merger, which seems to be a real hot button?
Yeah, I think it shows how it's just a really bad idea for a variety of reasons. I think if you were to ask people, hey, okay, so what if instead, you had either HBO Max or Paramount Plus end up in Apple's hands? I think people would be like, yeah, okay, fine, moving on. Or one of them ends up in Netflix hands. Yep, okay, moving on. I think because it's taking, Paramount carrying all of the Skydance drama, carrying the Viacom drama in a bunch. It's like just, I think, more clear that almost that old school consolidation view is something that people aren't really in for. I know that it will seem contradictory, like, well, won't it be consolidation with Netflix? Yeah, but I think they're also Netflix and Apple will be viewed as like outside of the traditional Hollywood spectrum, right? And so it on paper should be identical, but it definitely feels different. Yeah,
fair point. One of these pieces mentioned that the case that they're making, I think it's in the case with the states, is that that they are using the merger that was approved years back for Disney to acquire Fox's assets. They could actually look at how that turned out, because that was one case of similar circumstance. It was a large production studio buying another large production studio and absorbing it into its content. They could actually look at the numbers for that, and they did actually track everything that they're worried about and that the suit was filed over. It actually did lead to layoffs, job losses. It did lead to a slowdown in production, by the amount of studios being reduced by one. It does lower the level of competition. It does lead to monopolistic behavior. So they do actually have a pretty good case for this, whether or not it'll actually amount to anything. There is apparently a clause, if you read through these links in our show notes, there's a clause in the agreement surrounding the merger for Paramount and Warner Brothers that apparently they have to start paying out penalties past a certain point. So even if these cases can proceed and delay the merger, it will actually start costing the Paramount side millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars eventually if the case is stretched out and it delays this merger from happening. There will be penalties that they have to pay. I think one of them said $650 million potentially in penalties that have to be paid out. So there is an urgency for them to get these things resolved. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, the unspoken part of this whole merger is not necessarily, oh no, Star Trek's going to be on HBO Max. It's going to be that, there's going to be a huge consolidation of news media control and, things that, obviously they're much more politically and socially sensitive too. So it's a big deal. Obviously, selfishly on our side, Star Trek is in limbo right now. We know we're getting Strange New World season 4. That's coming out next week. We know we're getting season 5 in a shortened form next year. We know we're getting the final season of Starfleet Academy next season, but they haven't announced anything beyond that. And until they decide what's going on and how much money they have and who owns what, I don't know what's going to happen with Star Trek the longer these things push out.
Yeah, it's definitely not good to have this uncertainty either way.
All right, well, let's move on to some better news. So there's a trend in comic books that is one of the things I hate the most about comic book collecting. It is variant covers. Variant covers is something that has been around for a very, very, very long time, way longer than people realize. Even if it was as simple as there was an American version, a British version, and a Canadian version of comic books based on the prices that they used to put on the front of the books. Those are considered variations, but where it really took off was into the late 80s and 90s, where they would start slapping different covers on the same book and charging premiums for those books because they might not have printed as many of the special covers. And it was a trend that got so out of hand with so many people speculating that it kind of did some damage to the industry. A lot more people were buying books than were actually enjoying books, and it was a real divisive issue. It went away to a small extent, but not completely, and then it really resurfaced in the last 15 years. Variant comics are a huge business as far as, again, same book wrapped in a different cover, put out, in some cases, dozens and dozens and dozens of different covers, and make people who are obsessive collectors then go and have to hunt down all the different variations, some of which are designed for a specific store or a specific country or a specific event or anything like that. And what that does to the comic collecting market is it means that the vendors themselves can't sometimes resist the opportunity to make more money. When publishers put the books out, they're often selling them to the vendors at a fairly decent amount of money, and then they turn those comics over to the consumers and they add however much markup they think is fair market value, in some cases more than might be considered fair market value. And it becomes very challenging because if you are somebody who is a completist or somebody who really loves a certain character or book and you want to have a complete set that includes all variations, it can become very, very expensive and very, very frustrating to try and get a hold of books, especially when some of those books are literally coming out on a Wednesday, and the day they come out, they're already premium priced by the people who just got them from the publisher. So a book comes out, it costs $5 for a regular edition and $10 for a variant edition, and they'll already have it up on their wall for $50 because that's what the market bears, and someone will pay it. So DC Comics has announced this week that they are taking aim at some of these comic book shops, specialty shops, that are ostensibly price gouging, that they are, doing this practice of taking these premium covered books and selling them for a disproportionate amount of money based on, the limited availability. So what they're doing is they are setting up guidelines, essentially saying, hey, we're going to send you these books. We recommend that you sell them for, they say it is strongly encouraged to limit a limit of 5 times the original cover price for an unsigned book and 10 times for an autographed book. And they are threatening to discontinue future sales of exclusive variants to retailers that exceed those guidelines. That's a huge change in the philosophy of this. They have always been a little frustrating, and it's not just DC, it's across the board.
Yeah.
The publishers will just say, hey, we sent you the books. You paid for the books. What happens to them after the market is fine. But there has been so much frustration, and this is particularly around this absolute Batman, absolute universe that DC has created over the past few years, there are so many variations on these covers, and people are very passionate about collecting these books. But they're also putting out these terrific editions where, you can get a blind bag, or you can get a special edition that comes straight from the publisher that's already pre-signed by the artist or pre-signed by the writer, or all of the above. It might have some very specific, unique piece of art on it. And they are charging massive markups on these books. And in most cases, they're never seeing, like, they'll get those books and they'll put them online before they'll even sell them in their stores, just because that's where you can get the most money for them. And I don't blame a vendor to a certain extent, although can argue that it is mildly unethical to do so. So 5 times the cover price. Most of these books are coming out at about $4 to $5 US, somewhere in that ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
So, $25 for an unsigned special variant edition, $50 to $60 for an autographed book. And apparently they're going to be doing auditing, and they're going to, keep track. How, they do not say. I'm fascinated by that process. Feels very Big Brothery to me. And they want people to play nicely in the distribution of these books. I'm not sure this is going to work. I am fascinated to see if DC could follow through on threats to, stop sending premium editions to stores. That would be fascinating, considering this isn't exactly a growth industry. It's kind of a legacy industry. It seems like you'd be cutting off your nose to spite your face if you started alienating the vendors who sell your goods. But I'm fascinated by this, and I'd really love to hear what your thoughts on this, Jaime.
Yeah, it does strike me as having some forethought of, like, well, you don't want to eat your own seed corn, right? Your belly's a little bit more full today, and then you're going to have nothing tomorrow.
Yep.
And you're right to bring up the late 90s comic book bonanza that happened. Beanie Babies are of the same era, and we've seen many of these cycles. Pokemon trading cards are currently in the limelight.
Magic cards, lots of stuff. Yep.
Yeah. So just a little bit of greed is okay, is what the limits say, but not too much. Again, not eating your own seed cards. Like, look, we're not saying don't be greedy. We're saying restrain yourself a little bit. Do you need to eat 2 boxes of Krispy Kreme donuts, or would you be satiated with 1?
Now that you say it like that, this does feel like a distinctly American issue, doesn't it?
It's kind of not surprising. It's a very consumerist society, very wealthy, a very individualist, pioneering entrepreneur. Like, there's a variety of ways in which you could frame this story. It does make me wonder about, if DC is unable to get a tamp down on this, will that just remove the last vestiges of, as you said, not really a growth industry, hasn't really fully recovered from the heydays of the 90s. So I don't know. I don't know. It probably also, getting back to the monopoly discussions, it probably would, if they went too hard on one of these retailers for violating the policy, it probably would cause a Department of Justice to take a look at this and try to figure that out, and have people sort of yelling across the aisle of, like, it's insane, I should be able to charge what I want. It's like, what do you mean, dude? Like, this is the only one who sells this thing. How can you justify this one has a foil cover in silver versus that one has a foil cover in bronze, and I have to buy them for absurd prices because I literally can't, like, just go get it.
And it's in the cases of some of the wider distribution ones too, you could live in a town. Seattle has several great comic book stores. You could go to one store and, on the day that a book is released, they could already have it up on their wall and be charging a huge premium price. You could go to a different store that is playing more by the contemporary rules and has it out for, maybe double cover price or maybe cover price. Like, it's such a strange thing too. It's like, we want you to self-police, but play nicely. It's like, yeah, that usually works in capitalism. That plays out fine.
I'm just playing the long game here, Jonathan. Like, I've either got to just wait long enough to see if those variants of X-Force number 1 become valuable, or do I nudge the the boulder off the hill, so to speak, and say, can I convince some sort of social media campaign to do a book burning exercise specific to the X-Force 1 variants?
Yeah. Well, actually, you'll be happy to know, Jaime, that they packaged those inside plastic bags that were transparent, so you can still see the cover, but each one came with a card. There was a card inside each one of those bundles. Because of the era in which it came out, it was really soon after the debut of the character called Deadpool. And one of the cards that comes in those books is Deadpool's quote-unquote rookie card. So if you happen to, in your collection, have that particular edition in its bag with the quote-unquote rookie card for Deadpool, you actually do have a little bit of an investment compared to the rest of the editions. So there you go.
This is a quick personal story, but indulge me for 30 seconds.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
I guess the other thing is like me trying to convince people that, hey, there's PFAS microplastics in those Death and Return of Superman bags. You need to destroy them. But the real story is me as a wee lad trying to get. It was literally 2 copies. Okay, I wasn't even trying to be like a crazy scalper. I wanted 2 copies of the Return of Superman, the white bag. I was like, one to read, because I was champing at the bit to see how he comes back, and I was gonna save the baggie and shove it back in, kind of thing. But hey, it's an open copy, I can read it. And then I have one that was like, in that era, this is putting me through college, get me a yacht and a helicopter. Like that was the store in the vault one, right?
Yeah.
And poor me at the time as a wee lad, I don't know, it must have been 10 to 12, I guess, did not know that like you can't just roll up to your local comic book shop and get that. It was weeks ahead of time pre-orders. And I guess the sullen look on my face made the owner take out of his own personal copies, because he got 4 to 6 some number, and actually sold me 2, saying, okay, I'll put my own other ones on back order. So you're hurting the kids.
Yeah.
Scalpers.
Yeah, it's true.
Just a little bit of greed. Not too much greed, just some greed.
I won't.
Responsible amount of greed.
I won't spoil your story by telling you what the worth of that book is right now, but let's just say you won't be retiring off of that one.
That's what I'm telling you. I got to tell you, the fake news about PFAS being in the covers, some sort of book burning, religious, or is oil prices too high? Oh, you can put stuff in your fireplace. Comic books burn really good. And
well, be careful. That's how we ended up with the incredible rarity of books previous to the 1950s, is they burned half of the good books. That's why we only have a handful of Action Comics #1 when they printed tens of thousands of them.
Yeah, and you create the paper mache challenge and make it go viral. And it's like, oh, comic books work really good to make this bespoke hat.
Yeah, encourage destruction of everyone else's collection. Yeah, every once in a while I'll see a story where it's like, it just breaks my heart, because as a longtime collector, I'll see these stories where it's like, oh, horrible fire or flood destroys person's collection. I'm like, that's just so upsetting. I just put myself in those shoes. It makes me so sad. And then for a moment I go, I guess that's one less copy of each one of those books. Yeah, it's probably a terrible person for saying that, but that's all right. All right, let's move on to our next story. So, amidst the reboot of the DC cinematic universe, there is this one last vestige of something else, and that is the Batman. So the Batman, which of course Matt Reeves is the creator of those ones, exists kind of outside of this reboot. They're kind of letting it do its own thing. He has a story he wants to tell. And so the Batman Part 2, which I don't know if they're going to have a different, more clever name for that down the road, is something that's been hotly anticipated. The first one was, I think, better than people were expecting, and so people are kind of curious to see what comes. Unfortunately, this new film has been delayed. They have now announced that it was going to be in theaters in October of 2027. Now it is not coming out until late February 2028. So this has been kicked down the road a few times. This was originally supposed to have come out last year. So it's really kind of rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. They put out a little bit of footage this week. I didn't even bother flagging it because it's nothing. It's not a trailer by any means, but they're assuring us that they are in fact working on this, but you are going to have to wait for another year and a half before this comes out, and more than that, honestly. Where does the Batman hold in your consciousness? Where does this particular iteration live for you? And is it out of sight, out of mind?
A little bit, but not because I'm not excited for it to come out. It just has been so bloody long that I'm like, oh yeah, I guess it has been longer than I thought. If you'd asked me, I would have said, oh, this is a movie, the Batman, it probably came out in like 2024, right? But clearly not. If
March 2022. March 2022.
There you go. Not if they thought the next one was 2025. I mean, clearly that's too soon. So it suffers a little bit from the like, oh, it's still really new. That's not too bad until you look at the dates and say, ooh, that's getting a little long in the tooth. That's right. We did have the Penguin series, and it's been a minute since that series came out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoyed the movie. I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I liked that they went back to sort of the more detective-y kind of story. I thought the Riddler was a great foil for that. I enjoyed the movie actually quite a bit, and I thought the Penguin, as far as a televised spin-off, was terrific. But 6 years is a humongous gap in sequelization. Now, I mean, obviously, we've seen things that have been many, many years. I mean, Spaceballs 2 is coming out next year, and that was like 30-something years. So these things happen, but it really does, it does make you wonder behind the scenes how badly things get bungled to get to this point, to get to something where, a hot property like Batman, pretty much put anything Batman in a movie theater and it's going to make a lot of money. One of the most beloved comic book characters around, lots of great creative people that want to work on it, big name movie stars, and they still can't get out of their own way enough to get these movies out beyond every 6 years. Are we going to be in like the early 2030s by the time we get to the finale of this trilogy? I mean, we might see the death and reboot of the DCEU by that point, right?
Yeah, and this delay, going from October, I'm like, okay, October, pretty reasonable time for a Batman movie. It's close enough to the holidays. You have, depending where in October, it could be there for Canadian Thanksgiving and then hang around long enough to wait for American Thanksgiving in November. I'm like, okay, family stuff, get people out there. Doing it in February, like that's a time of doom for a variety of films, and really is a terrible, if you care about the Academy Awards as a filmmaker, is a really terrible time to say, oh, we're going to miss the Academy Awards and have to wait for the 2029 awards to show. Like, will people remember? I mean, there's just so much that makes me think this, if it's going to go to 2028, you really should try to do like May, Memorial Day maybe, and just say just eat it for another quarter. I know it's tough. I know number must go up for investors, but you're already missing the October timeframe. You're missing the Christmas holidays. Like, what's wrong with just doing it a little bit longer at that point?
Well, it does make you wonder what else Warner Brothers has in that window for that time too. We don't know, because we're talking about something that's now like, yes, 18 months down the road. We don't know whether there's going to be another Superman movie or a Justice League movie or something else that they're planning on releasing that summer, because we're talking about something that's way down the road now. So goofy either way. And the last story I've got here is a good one. So your mileage may vary on whether or not you enjoyed the Mandalorian and Grogu film in the movie theater, which maybe the less said about that one, the better. But Lego Star Wars The Mandalorian is a new special that's coming out on Disney Plus, and it's coming out soon. It's coming out on September 2nd. They're going to put out this one of those nice little 30-minute specials that they do, kind of retell the stories, but tell them in a quirky, Lego-y kind of way. I find the Lego video games / movies very charming. I find them very enjoyable. I've watched practically every one, all the different iterations, and it can't be worse than that movie. It can't be worse than the movie. So I'm looking forward to this probably as much or more so than I was the film. So I will check this out. It's Disney Plus September 2nd, right before back. And what do you got for us, Jaime?
Kind of a strange one. No pun intended. It's when you hear the premise of what they're doing with Stranger Things, Netflix is going to release a VHS quality version, which will be in 4:3 aspect ratio, the kind that nature intended when we grew up as wee lads.
Can we do pan and scan too while we're at it?
Right, they're gonna have to, because that was definitely framed at 16:9.
Yep.
Right, and they're not only going to have it be in 4:3, they're also going to give it a crappy staticky kind of filter to it, where it's not quite as crisp and clear. So it will, I think, be as close as possible to completing the homage of the 80s of like watching all of these films that it pays tribute to. You probably watched them if you're, Jonathan's age, my age. You probably watched it on the VCR that had the tracking problems and needed to be rewound and cleaned and everything. So kind of a fun one. So
I think that sometimes it's not the first project to release a VHS version of itself. And every time I go to a retail location and I see VHS versions of things that are newly made, and the same thing I get when I see cassette versions of things that are made is, I guess it's kitschy for the people that didn't experience it, but for those of us that did, there's not enough money to give me to want one of those things because the quality is so terrible. We like where we are now if we live through all that stuff, like cassettes hiss, they sound terrible. VHS tapes used to get chewed up by VHS machines, and the quality degrades with every single play in a very, very noticeable way. I find these things very kitschy and cute, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Look at that box. I don't want it. I don't want it at all. Not for me.
Yeah.
Can I take you down a little rabbit hole for a second?
Sure.
Have you read about the Stranger Things conformity gate conspiracy?
No, I have not.
So there was a theory back in January when the series was coming to a conclusion that there was a missing episode or a special episode of the show that was going to come later. That maybe it was going to be a week later, or maybe it was going to be a month later, maybe it was going to be on a special anniversary, maybe they were going to do it down the road. But that if you go back and you watch that final episode, that a bunch of things don't add up. Some things changed. Like the color of the school outfits when they graduate is orange, but the school prior to that had been a different color. And some of the stuff in, people's hair changed in different weird ways. And there's this whole conspiracy. If you feel like you want to go down the rabbit hole, and it's really kind of fun down there, there's a lot of people that believe that the story's not over, that when they came back through that portal, they didn't actually escape. They actually just escaped into a different version of reality, still controlled by Henry/Vecna. And every time I see one of these things that like this release, I'm like, is this going to be the thing? Is this going to be the thing? I'm afraid that I might have drank the Kool-Aid on this one. That when they lay out the case for it, you're like, either the Duffer Brothers are really terrible filmmakers who missed a lot of really clear things and forgot about a lot of stuff, or they are keeping the door open for something down the road. Now, the kit that just came out promoting Stranger Things for the awards season apparently said eligible for TV awards and also for film awards, and there's no film. So there's rumors out there that, or speculation out there that, they're gonna do the stage play that they did, the thing they had on Broadway, that's like the precursor story, that they're going to tell that one, that they're going to go back to Netflix and tell that story at some point. I find this whole thing fascinating, and I'll throw a link into the show notes. People can wade down, but if you just type that into your favorite social media platform, or God forbid, and I don't advise this, Reddit, you will find a lot of people who are very, very convinced that there's something else going on there. And I'm like, is this how you get into like Pizzagate? Is this how things start slipping down? Am I getting that old that I'm starting to fall for these things? But it's an interesting discussion for sure.
Yeah, I'm ruined on these kinds of things. And although there is kind of a sort of whack job aspect to some conspiracy theories you see out there, especially on Reddit or Twitter, my significant other brought up a non-conspiracy, but she brought up a like, oh, did you notice these things that happened in one particular episode of Widow's Bay that we're still watching? And I said, no, I didn't. And she's like, well, people online say that like this is what that means. And I said, wow, that's fascinating. I said, however, Game of Thrones season 8 production quality has ruined me on these being intentional things versus whoopsies because of the Starbucks cup incident.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Of like the Starbucks cup that was left in scene. And I said, you know, I'm aware from listening to the Office Ladies podcasts. This is Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey from the Office TV show in the U.S. And they have a podcast where they rewatch the show. And they have talked about how on set, there are people who deal with continuity of like, hey, you know what? You ate that thing with your left hand. Every single take, you're going to have to eat it with your left hand. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to stitch it together in the edit. So allegedly, in the industry, there are people whose job is to do this. However, I also know that stupid Starbucks cup was there. So, and it made it not only into filming, but in through the edit and publication. I'm like, I feel like maybe that job went away or something. Yeah. I'm not sure what happened. I don't want to get into the like potential, you know, rat's nest of where that may be. But I'm like, anytime, and I read a little bit here about the conspiracy stuff. I'm like, oh, well, this missing thing. I'm like, that sounds like it could just be a continuity error.
Yep.
Starbucks cup. Do I have to just keep pointing out the Starbucks cup?
Yeah. And that's essentially what this one is. It's a lot of things where they're like, you know, they probably shot one scene at one point and then they had to, you know, adjust the set or whatever, and they put the thing in the wrong place, and everyone's like, that's a sign. But it's fun. It's really fun to see how invested some people have gotten on this stuff. So I throw a link to our show notes. Have a deep dive if you like, but it's a good time. In the meantime, let's move on to the main part of our show, where we're going to talk about House of the Dragon, and we're going to talk about Silo. So House of the Dragon, Season 3, Episode 4, Tumbleton, is where we're going to kick things off. This was more of the sort of post-Rhaenyra's claiming the throne, and also finding out that she got absolutely hoodwinked by the forces of Ormond Hightower at the end of last episode. So here we end up with this is sort of the whole episode is, you know, checking in on a lot of different people and sort of, you know, showing again how complicated it is to actually rule. But really, it's kind of a whole episode around learning who Ormond Hightower is and positioning him as the next big evil bad guy for the show. And they did a pretty good job of it. They show us a character who is a religious zealot, somebody who does not have the time of day for the Targaryen legacy and dragons and all that, but is, you know, somebody who says he is guided by his faith and, you know, has basically taken young Daeron Targaryen, who is Alicent's youngest son, under his wing and is trying to, you know, make him into a Hightower. It's particularly interesting that, you know, he's taken over this town of Tumbleton, which is not far from King's Landing, and it is a town that was loyal to Rhaenyra, and he doesn't put up the banners for the you know, the Aegon and the ruling, you know, Team Green. He puts up Hightower banners. So he's positioning himself almost as like, yeah, we want Daeron to be the king. So he's kind of pushing this kid who, you know, in this episode is kind of, you know, shown to be like basically like a hostage, more or less, right? Like he's He's somebody who is basically both in the thrall of and terrified of Ormond. And so we get all these different looks at him, how he deals with, Darren when he's alone, how he deals with people when he's in public, how he deals behind closed doors, how he deals with bad news. And we find out that this guy's a real piece of work.
Yeah, I do wonder some of what they set up for Ormond. Like, they made a big deal about how he needs like aromatherapy.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm like, is that going to be like his weakness? Like,
there's no way somewhere down the road that someone doesn't have a dragon poop near him or on him or beside him or something, right?
Yeah, I was like, okay, so they're gonna like mustard gas him by feeding the dragons a bunch of eggs, and then just it's like, oh well, it's non-violent to the populace. We can't burn them out, but we're gonna smoke them out.
Yeah, they don't give you a little tease like he has a really sensitive sense of smell unless it's going to pay off down the road. Somebody's going to do something disgusting nearby to or to him at some point.
Yeah, it didn't pay off in this episode, but I'm like, okay, keep a note on that one.
What's your impression of Ormond as sort of, like he's got a little bit of like Tywin Lannister, the sort of scheming and plotting. He's got a little bit of the like his I guess it would be his uncle Otto. He seems like quite a piece of work.
Yeah, we see something that seems like signs of justice orientation, but it's much more Machiavellian that we learn in the latter part of the episode, where it's like one of the Hightower knights, I think. Yep. It starts getting a little handsy, let's say, with the daughter in the household, and beats up. It breaks the arm, I think, of the mom. The mom, yeah, and is brought to justice. It seems like, oh, okay, this dude stood up for the common people, but well, no, actually, later on, he's going to take out one of those said common people because, like, at the same time, while he wants to sort of quell the immediate outrage, he also can't allow the people to, touch one of them, right? Like, you can't have a commoner touch a nobleman.
Yep. Yeah, and it plays out pretty grimly, and it plays out over the course of the episode. So you're trying to sort of get a sense of who this person is, and he talks about his religious values, and he talks about he seems like he's just very, very smug and very, very confident. And then when this incident happens, and this is the house where Hugh Hammer's wife is staying, right? Because I think that was her that almost got assaulted. And then this case comes before him, and they're like, okay, well, fine. Then, you're all witnesses. You're all saying this happened. I'm going to have my knight gelded. So, that's punishment for attempted rape, and have his arm broken for breaking this woman's arm. And everyone's like, oh, what a benevolent lord and leader. Maybe this won't be so bad. And of course, it comes back to later in the episode where they haul the man of the household into this basically meeting and say, like, hey, by the way, you laid your hands on one of our knights. That's essentially like hitting one of us. That's it for you. And puts a sword into Darren's hand and says, you're going to be our king. You have to do this. And I was worried for a second that he was suggesting he behead him, because I was like, wow, that is a bridge for, I think he's supposed to be like 14. Like, that's pretty intense. Instead, he just, out of fear for his uncle, he puts a sword through this man's chest and kills him. And then his dragon barbecues him and eats him, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, we kind of see, all sides of this person. And we see it in that moment, too, when Otto gets bad news at one point, and Darren sort of leans over to the person standing next to him and says, get out of the room. And this person walks out of the room, and then you see Ormond take out this Valyrian sword and just go to town on this giant oak table. So that he is emotionally unstable and violent. And so it does this whole episode kind of paints a picture of somebody who's clearly not a good person and clearly has his own agenda, which isn't necessarily, yes, we must have the right side of the Targaryens on the throne. He views Darren as not as a Targaryen, but as a Hightower, and his goal is to get the Hightowers there and to get these godless Targaryens out of the Red Keep and have, religious justice prevail. Which we've seen these themes in Game of Thrones before, but this is another one of those sort of zealot characters that is deeply unsettling.
For sure. That veneer of justice and hoity-toity, composed elegance, gentlemanness is, just a facade over the person that he really is. Yeah.
Outside of the main part of the episodes, that we do get kind of a touch in on a lot of different people. We see the continuing. One of my favorite parts of the show now is the continuing adventures of Aegon II and Clubfoot, Larys Strong, as they are trying to basically to be fair, it is Larys is trying to get the two of them onto a boat and overseas and away from all this so that they can have time to regroup, rebuild their forces, and then come back stronger with, quote unquote, the right king back in full health and ready to go again. The agenda for Aegon is a little different. He is all over the place. So in this one, they go to Rook's Rest, where the battle happened, where he ended up getting barbecued by his brother, and of course, we saw the fatal death of one of the dragon riders, in the first season or second season. He goes and he finds theoretically the body of Sunfire, his dragon, still lying there, although not obviously. Like, there's not like blood and guts everywhere. It's not like it's in pieces. He's convinced that Sunfire must still be alive, but then it's not moving. So I don't know what to make of that. And then they end up going to Rook's Rest, and they're trying to sort of figure out how they can, find passage or whatever else. And of course, Aegon cannot control himself and keeps shooting off his mouth and just making things worse and worse and worse. He ends up getting a job as a pee and poop separator. Which doesn't sound good. And
gotta strain it
because they won't pay if it's together. And from there, he ends up running afoul of this, knight who is essentially, quote unquote, running this refugee camp. All these people who have fled or, sort of trying to find a safe place during this gigantic war that's taken over the realm. And the guy basically says, I'll give you two choices. Either I'm going to murder you on the spot or you're going to kiss my shoes. And of course, his shoes are horrifying. This show really knows how to twist the knife sometimes.
Yeah.
That was so gross. But, this whole thing of like Aegon brought low has been an interesting journey to watch these two, obviously Aegon horribly scarred. And, we've got, Larys, who of course has got a physical disability. One of his legs it doesn't work properly, so he's hobbling around, and they're just such an excellent odd couple. It just kind of reminds me of sort of classic Game of Thrones of like two mismatched characters kind of lost in the wilderness. That seemed like it was a thing in several different parts of the show, and somehow that one just tickles my fancy.
Yeah, it is a good one. It's a bit different from like the Hound and Arya kind of thing. But it has that same sort of fit, right? Of two people on a journey, limited resources, have to lie about who they are because it's dangerous in the travel.
Yeah. Okay, so then we got to check in with Harrenhal, where things have gotten even worse for Kristen Cole, who turns up. And he thought he was supposed to be meeting Aemond and his gigantic, massive dragon there. And along with Gwaine Hightower, they show up and they find a lot of barbecued soldiers. So they know that Aemond has been there. And then they find they run into what's her name? Alice Rivers.
Mm-hmm.
And Alice is like, "Oh, were you looking for Aemond? He's not here right now." And so we have this sort of weird moment of the two of them being like, well, we just marched halfway across the realm to get here. Our guy's not here. There's no sign of him. We don't know what to do now. What are we supposed to do with ourselves? And so they kind of get it in their heads to like kind of go guerrilla. They decide they're going to just go and try and join up with as many of their forces as they can and kill as many of their foes as they can in the process because they don't really have anything else to do with their army. It's a weird place that they find themselves right now.
Yeah. I think they were in a real bad spot because it's very similar to the choices that Rhaenyra's forces had to make of like, well, we were told to stay here and wait for Vhagar to show up so we can sneak attack.
Yep.
Bro, it's been way too long. This is longer than they said to wait. Should we go and help fight? Should we go back? What should we do? Yep. Yeah, the fog of war is real here. Yeah.
And it's a good mystery for us as viewers, too, because the last we saw of Aemond, he went in and he killed all the Strong family, but he did take a knife in the kidneys there, and we saw him bleeding out at the feet of Alice at one point. Couple episodes ago, so we're not sure what's going on there. She says he's gone, but that doesn't make sense. And how do you hide a dragon?
I was also wondering about this as well, of like, okay, so could she be hiding Aemond somewhere? I'm like, yeah, totally plausible. What happens to Vhagar? I'm like, all right, you either believe that like Vhagar, gets hungry and like, I'm gonna go find some sheep, and happens to fly off, to very far apart where like the good sheep are, I'll be back. I'm not going to the close Walmart. I'm going to the further one because it's got better produce selection, and maybe the funnier one I saw online was, given the crazy sneak attacks that Vhagar has been known to do, is like Vhagar was in the room, you just couldn't see her hiding in the shadows.
Yeah, it may as well be, really.
It's dark. They don't really know the layout of Harrenhal. Totally plausible. They're like, wait a minute, did that wall move? I thought there was a wall here.
Yeah, and of course, legendarily, the biggest, scariest, oldest dragon in the realm, right? So, yeah, not exactly like put it in a closet and it'll, don't knock anything over. So, checking in on Team Black. So there's some stuff going on there. So, of course, Rhaenyra is still trying to figure out how to rule justly. She's dispatched her husband / uncle Daemon to go and try and get some gold out of the Eyrie. So he goes up there and has a pretty terse conversation with the lady of the Eyrie,
the Vale,
Jane. Yeah. And he basically says, like, hey, you said you were going to send us soldiers. You never sent us soldiers. How about you give us some cash, because we're a little light in the wallet right now. And she's like, oh, I don't know why I should give you money. He's like, well, if you give me the money, I'll leave. And she's like, okay, I tell you what, that sounds good. So she gives him a few sacks full of gold and sends him on his way. But then we get this really cool scene where, Cyrax, his dragon, is like, I don't want to go where you want me to go. I smell something. And takes him to this cliffside where he sort of sticks his head in the door and realizes there's another dragon there. And not only is there another dragon there, but there's another rider there. And it's his daughter. So here we have this sort of weird scene where, like, he kind of didn't know what was going on with Rhaena. He thought that she had gone with the kids and that she was watching over them. And, she kind of thought that was, or he thought that was the deal. And now he discovers her with this wild dragon that everybody for some reason knows is called Sheep Stealer. And, has to sort of reconcile the fact that, like, he doesn't have a great relationship with this daughter, particularly because she hasn't been a dragon rider. She doesn't want to give up her dragon now that she feels like she has found purpose and value in having a dragon. But he's also screwed because he has to realize that, his wife / niece / the queen has said whoever was doing that is responsible for Jace's death, and therefore she wants to be able to exact revenge. which leads to a pretty complicated little conversation where, in the end, he basically says, I guess I have to, she basically says, you have to keep my secret. You owe me one good thing. And he's like, I guess I do. So he ends up killing a shepherd, barbecuing him and presenting his head to Rhaenyra later in the episode and saying like, yeah, that's the guy who had Sheep Stealer. And now there is no woman on the Sheep Stealer anymore. That didn't happen. How long do you think before he gets found out and then she gets furious with him? One episode, two? How long do you think it takes?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to take very long. Rhaenyra was already suspicious, and was it Masira? I forget her.
Massaria.
Massaria is also very like, yeah, that's a total lie. So, you're going to have somebody else feeding that. Like, are you really sure? Isn't it kind of interesting that like, the dragon wasn't injured enough for us to find evidence of it, alive or dead. The writer, he just got lucky barbecuing him specifically, plausible stuff that happens, but seems very convenient. And he's, not acting all himself per se as he's trying to hide it. So I definitely think this is going to come back to cause tension, between Rhaenyra and Daemon.
Every time throughout the seasons we've already seen, every time he lies to her, she finds out. And every time she finds out, she's furious. And he does it over and over and over again. And I get, this is one of the hardest ones. This is his daughter and his wife. Nobody wants to be in this position, but you just know that this is going to bite him in the butt.
Yeah. And kudos to the folks who did the dragon work. The way that they showed the little movements and everything. For one, it was really good for them to show that Caraxes is like a beast. And I think it was Viserys who said that like the fantasy is that we control them. They're they're wild beasts. They do what they do. It's like riding a tiger into battle kind of thing. Yeah. Having him lose control, not completely, but like, bro, I didn't want to go here. Why are you doing this? Stop. Find the hole of the cave with the other dragon. Yeah. And having Caraxes be like, I am ready to fight whatever the heck is in there. That should not be there. Sheep Stealer on the other side, cautiously watching as Rhaena goes to some dude he doesn't know, right? And he sees them get close, and both dragons arch up like, oh, wait, is that an attack on my master? I need to intervene. And both masters have to say, no, this is fine. We're hugging. Yeah. This is okay. This is not an attack. I'm not in danger. Sit back.
We're going to hug it out. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, dragons don't hug, right? So they don't really comprehend, like, is this a wrestling move, a combat? Is this an embrace for love? They don't know, but they're loyal. They're like ready to protect you, sort of thing. So I thought that was really fascinating how much they were very bestial and just kudos there. They feel very alive because of those little things.
No, it's a really good point that. Obviously we see the dragons a lot as the pew pew pew. They're these, it's F-35s. You don't always see them as characters. And you're right. There was actually an understanding of them as, sentient beings and not just, nuclear missiles with people on top.
Yeah.
Speaking of dragon riders, Hugh and Ulf, these guys are getting a rough run. Hugh is basically flipping out because his wife is in Tumbleton, and he's like, hey, I want to go take my dragon, and and Rhaenyra is like, fine, good deal, you take your dragon, you go and patrol, but like, don't engage, we don't want to burn the whole city down. He's like, I don't want to burn the whole city down, my wife's there. And then Ulf goes out to the bar, meets up with his old buddies, and then comes back to the castle and starts like trying to basically like get in good with his buddies by getting stuff off of the queen, who is like, you're gonna go hang out in a bar and you're trying to do favors for your drunken bar buddies? How about instead you get on your dragon and do some work? And by the way, you're not allowed to go to the bar anymore, which is like the only thing he wants to do. Worse and worse and worse for these two guys.
Yeah, Rhaenyra brings up the fact that like, I can't have you stabbed in the bar.
Yeah.
and then I lose the person
dragon rider.
The tactical nuke no longer has the ability to launch anymore.
Yeah. I mean, and she's right. She's 100% right. He's still trying to figure out like what all this means for him. More than anything, again, you see the part where he goes into the bar and they're like, "Oh, drinks are on you. You're a knight and a dragon rider now." And he's like, "I guess I don't really have a lot of money because that's not a thing that we have now." So you could just see the brewing discontent with both these guys as it continues forward. And the last sort of big thing, I think, I guess you touch very briefly on the fact that we see Corlys. Corlys is like, you know what, I'm out. Last episode, obviously, he used the B word, which Rhaenyra is not a big fan of about her sons. And in this one, without even saying goodbye, he basically like hops on his horse and says, "I'm going to go kill the rest of the Triarchy for what they did to my house and to my fleet," and leaves his son Alan to basically become the de facto hand of the queen, which is a weird kind of move, bit of a dick move, to be honest. But I guess he's he didn't get his way, so he wants to make a point, and he's like, "I'm out." Yeah,
it's a risky move. I mean, it does make sense as a put my son in a place where I can try elevating him in a different way, since he wasn't going to be elevated through family name by the queen, and also be able to show her if you're not going to help me, I'm not going to help you as directly, but I'm not abandoning you either, right? I'm giving you somebody that I'm claiming here is capable.
Yeah.
And I think Alan does a pretty good job of saying, "Look, dude, I'm not raised in the court. I don't know how this works." And when he has to go tell Rhaenyra, he's like, "Look, I think my dad kind of needed to go beat some people up and just sort of work out his stress that way. This is maybe for the best that he's not here." You know? And he smoothed it over, I think, pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, we do see from, later in the episode, we see Alan, and he seemed like a great first mate on the ship, and he seems like a pretty stable-headed, person with, good perspective. It's just a question of whether Rhaenyra will listen is I guess the big issue now. And the last sort of thing that is worth touching on is what happens with Alicent and Helena. So they're being kept as prisoners inside of the Red Keep, but they're being treated with a pretty high level of respect. They get to get outside privileges and they get to stay in a nice part of the castle and stuff. They're not thrown in the dungeons or anything. But I don't think there's any way to read what happened in this episode other than Alicent finding out that Helena is pregnant. They never actually explicitly say the words, but I think it's pretty clear that's the message that they show, which is another one of those ruh-roh moments, because Helena being pregnant with potentially Aegon's child is another threat to Rhaenyra's reign. So the question becomes, will Rhaenyra have to kill Helena?
Yeah, the only thing you can hope for from the Alicent side is please be a daughter, and see if we can convince Rhaenyra to allow the child to be born, see what it is, and deal with it then, rather than proactively killing Helena, which would be probably the better, smarter move from Rhaenyra's standpoint.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Obviously we've seen casualties big and small on both sides of this conflict already. It's spiraled out of control. But the one that is, I think, the ones that are the most sort of upsetting and galling, obviously the murder of Helena's son, the heir to the throne from Aegon's side, was horrifying. And then now we've seen two of Rhaenyra's sons die in this conflict. The idea of murdering babies is a pretty icky one at any time, but here in this show, would you put it past them to kill a pregnant lady and/or? I mean, we've seen them kill a pregnant lady on Game of Thrones before, and/or killing babies. Boy, this is some dark stuff we're treading towards.
Yeah, I mean, you've got her locked in a tower. Oh no, she fell out the window in the middle of the night.
Yeah. She decided she didn't like the accommodations.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was a good episode. I didn't love this one. It was just a little bit all over the place, just because of they're kind of giving you a lot of different pieces. But as far as fleshing out Ormond and fleshing out, sort of the state of, where everybody is, and just, again, a lot of foreshadowing in this episode. Helena's pregnancy, Damon lying to Rhaenyra, like we see a lot of stuff that is sort of setting up for future stuff. Aegon have to lick poop off boots. It's going to be interesting to see where they go. And this is the halfway point. So we're now 4 out of 8 episodes in. We talked about how the first 2 episodes kind of felt like they were more conclusionary of the previous story, and now we're kind of starting somewhere new. It will be interesting to see where they get to and where they decide to go from here. It feels like we're due for a pew pew, because we kind of have had 2 episodes now that have been really much more like, table setting and getting people into positions and stuff like that. It feels like somewhere in the next couple episodes there ought to be some kind of something pew pewy. Or maybe they blew their budget on the dragons interacting this week.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, especially because we talked about the fact that the first 2 episodes of this season were clearly meant to be the final 2 of last season. So how does the pacing work? Budget concerns. I do think you're right. I do think the next one has got to get something a little bit more going. Not to say that these episodes were bad, just like the pacing is important when we know we need to start ramping up towards the season finale.
And even beyond that, the overall finale. I mean, we're really only talking about 12 episodes left in the entire series. They're only going to do another season and a half, and there's a lot of players in the field right now. Like, we have a lot of characters in a lot of different places, and more than just 2 sides. It's not green versus black anymore. There's different shades of green. There's different shades of black. It'll be interesting to see where they go the rest of the season, and then where they decide to land this, because they don't have a ton of runway left, and they have to get to the end of the war, in a somewhat satisfying function to end this series. Hopefully they'll land this one better than they did the main series.
Yeah.
Now, a word from our sponsor.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. All backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
Now, back to the show.
All right, you want to jump over to Silo?
Let's go for it.
Silo, Season 3, Episode 2, It's All Good. So, the first episode ended with a note. Juliet ends up with a note in her soup that says, hey, if you really want to know what's going on, meet us here. So she goes out and basically she loses her security detail and goes and meets with some of the rebels that have sort of stayed underground during this sort of post-revolution time in her silo. And of course, it's Patrick Kennedy, it's Sandy, who she used to work with, and they are basically telling her, hey, we know what you really saw out there. What you saw is the beautiful outside with the trees and the birds and the butterflies. And she's like, I don't know if that's what I saw, but something's up clearly. We also find out that Sheriff Billings' wife, Kathleen, is a member of this group. She's the one who got her arm whacked in episode 1. And so he's trying to sort of continue to do his job and try to turn a blind eye to what she's been up to, although he clearly knows and kind of confronts her in this episode about it. And so this episode is really, it's about Juliet trying to sort of peel back the layers. She realizes that, hey, maybe I need to stop taking these meds that they're giving me because they may not be actually as helpful as I thought they were. But of course, we also, we see the nurse like digging around in her sink to see if she actually swallowed her pills. We know that they're still watching her. They've got a camera in her room, and she hasn't figured out that yet, which is disappointing. It's disappointing because we're used to Juliet being like really shrewd, and this is a very different version of Juliet who's all obviously drugged up. So hopefully we'll see more and more of her as the weeks go on. And then we also find out there's this sort of larger conspiracy of, the conspiracy to put these sort of mind erasing drugs into the water supply, right? So there's this sort of larger conspiracy of, well, if she doesn't figure this out soon, everyone's going to have their memories wiped and everyone's going to become like her, confused and compliant and sort of following orders. And then we also kind of flip back and forth to the past, right? Where we're seeing this Congressman Daniel, who is, trying to sort of put together a bit of a mystery himself. What's going on with his sister who's lost her memory? He meets with this doctor who talks about doing these, tests on memory suppression, and he ends up encountering the journalist from the end of last season, Helen, who is trying to sort of sneak in, and he finds out that his sister and Helen have actually been talking, and that there's maybe a conspiracy going on there as well. So yeah, we kind of have these sort of dual conspiracies happening in the two different timelines, all to do with memory deletion or forced memory eradication, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the way they stitch these two together. That like that doctor, I guess, is the source of the memory erasing drug technique that is used, and I think has been used several times, according to the AI that was talking to Camille. That like her silo's been successfully reset 4 or 6 times. I forget the number he says.
Yeah, and it's funny because for the first 2 seasons of the show, there was always that like, why don't people remember, like, why is there no history written down of like how we all got here and like how this all happened and why the outside is bad? Like, all they have is the pact, which is deliberately obtuse. They don't really have, other than this sort of oral history that quote unquote rebels carry through. They don't really have this history of like, how did we all get here? And then, now that we sort of know more about this, that, maybe this was done deliberately, and, so it's an interesting wrinkle to this whole sort of storyline, right?
Yeah. I still wonder. This episode, I think, maybe works a little better with the structure of having, flip-flopping between the past and the present to link them together. I still do wonder if, as difficult it'd be to not have Rebecca Ferguson, the star of the show, on for an episode or two, I do wonder if you would prefer to have an arc that's like, here's the past arc. Okay, we're done with that. Now let's come back to the present, now that you know that information.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it when talking about this last week, the first episode. The way the book is structured, the second book Split is structured, is very much more focused on just telling you the backstory and not as focused on what's happening in Silo 18. It wouldn't work. You're right. It wouldn't work in this kind of narrative if you had to be like, hey, Rebecca Ferguson, you're a massive Hollywood star. However, go sit over there for 8 episodes while we tell this story. Now, maybe there's a more elegant way to do it than what they're doing. I find the biggest challenges so far, I don't feel much of an investment in the story with Daniel and Helen and Charlotte in the past. It's interesting because I'm interested in how they're going to tell the story of how we get to the silo, but I don't find any of those characters, I haven't really invested in them yet. I don't know how you feel sort of 2 episodes in. Like, do you find, Daniel and Helen and Charlotte compelling enough that you're like, well, I'm rooting for them, I want to see what happens? Or is it just about the bigger picture?
Yeah, I don't really feel as connected to them emotionally. I agree with that, and I do think they're kind of more plot device for the most part. Of like, it's kind of like a flashback, but none of the people involved are the same people. I think that's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's easy to see the parallels. They're doing, I would say, a decent job of that, of sort of saying, oh, well, there's this thing in the past with memory wiping and suppression. obviously that's a thing that's going on in the future. They must be correlated. But as far as telling me an interesting story in the past and making me, particularly, I find the part that's missing is just I just don't find the Daniel character very compelling yet. And obviously the Charlotte character is a bit of a closed off box, just because she's the in 2 scenes in the first episode and 1 in this episode where she doesn't have any memories. I'm hoping that as the story starts to expand, and maybe over the course of the season, we'll come to care more about her, about Helen's story, about Daniel's story, and maybe that there'll be more of that investment that we feel. But right now, I'm like, go back to the stuff with Juliet. I love her. She's great. She's, and of course, Rebecca Ferguson is such a talented performer. I'm like, yeah, show me all of the her, and I don't care about this other stuff, which is a shame because the story matters, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's a long season. This is a 10-episode season. This is only 2 episodes in. And, we've talked obviously about the fact that for so many of these shows, they're playing the long game, right? They're talking about 4 complete seasons of 40 episodes that you will have in your Apple TV library ad infinitum if you have a subscription, right? Whereas here we are 2 episodes into the 3rd season. That's not really where their number one priority is. It's about telling the big picture in the long game.
Yeah, I think we're 5th of the way through, so I'm not terribly worried, especially because they know that there is a 4th and final season, and they have books with endings, so there's no concern per se there. It does seem like it's planned. I'm maybe complaining here in the moment of like, hey, I would kind of like these to be split into arcs, maybe, but I could see how in practice that might be kind of difficult as a week to week sale sort of thing. So just like Disney Plus offers the like fully chronological watching order of the story, not the release date, maybe Apple TV will give us a fully chronological version, option to watch this when it all comes out.
Yeah. Well, I'll be curious to explore the books in full once we sort of get to the end of the series and just sort of talk about the way the narratives are sort of told in a book story versus a television story. But yeah, I'm hoping we start to see it pick up a little bit because, again, I think the thing that's hurting is that we're not getting the Juliet we know, who is this brash, brave, smart, very capable person. We're getting a very much watered down version of that while she figures out who she is and tries to sort of put her pieces together. And then we're introduced to this backstory that is still kind of finding its footing. So we're not getting this show kicking on full speed, right? We're getting them sort of in their warm-up stretches. I know by the time we get to the middle of the season, it's all going to start, ramping up and feeling better. But yeah, I haven't had my feet, my socks knocked off my feet by these first 2 episodes, other than to say I love this world and I find it fascinating. But I'm hoping we start to see a ramp up a little faster soon. Any other thoughts on It's All Good?
No. I think it's definitely setting. It's like a glue episode. It looks like it's setting the stage for the presumed next episode that will probably have something really big happen. That's kind of what I feel like. They know that she's not taking the pills anymore. If she's not taking the pills, they're gonna have to like shove them into her mouth, kind of thing. Or eliminate her, which isn't really plausible because she's this iconic character now, and you don't want to stoke the flames of the rebellion again. So I feel like that's going to come to at least a miniature version of a head in this next episode. Yeah.
Hopefully, as we were just talking about with House of the Dragon, hopefully we get to ramp it up to a little more excitement than we did this last couple episodes. So. All right, well, let's jump over to our watch list. I will kick things off with a couple of things. I started watching a show on Disney Plus recently. It's called The Doomies. And The Doomies is a new animated series. It's produced by a French animation studio, and it is set in France, but the characters sound American, which I find really incongruent, but it's I got sort of turned on to it because I saw a few people on social media saying, hey, if you liked Gravity Falls, this will be something you might want to take a look at. And Gravity Falls is one of the best short run Disney animated series ever. My daughter was a big fan. She and I watched it together when it was originally on. It was 2012 to 2016. It was a couple seasons plus some shorts and some extra stuff. But it was very, very well done series that kind of told the story of this brother and sister who end up in this world full of mysteries in Oregon. And, you know, all these sort of, you know, Bigfoot and, you know, all these different sort of mysteries of the, you know, obscure. The Doomies kind of takes the same idea in that it follows two friends, Bobby and Romy, who live in this little town on the coast of France. And they, in the first episode, they're trying to find just something interesting to get up to. And there's all these sort of tourist trappy kind of like, you know, come see the bog person, come see the, you know, the statue of this and the mysterious, you know, location of that. And they end up accidentally opening a portal to another dimension. And this dimension is filled with monsters, of course. And so the story basically is similar to Gravity Falls in that it is a funny, quirky show, quirky characters in an unusual location. And it's kind of a Monster of the Week show with a larger overarching big bad behind it, kind of Buffy-ish, kind of Gravity Falls-ish. I can't say after watching the first few episodes, which I enjoyed, I can't say that it grabbed me with its charm quite as quickly as Gravity Falls did. I find the humor of that show just kind of hit me, and I think a lot of people in a certain way. It's very both sweet and also funny and sardonic. For me, it's just a really high bar. The Doomies is very enjoyable so far, but it's not quite there. Maybe it will be. It's a full, like, I think 22 episode season that's dropped, and there's talk that they're going to make a second season. I'll be curious to see how this show continues to play out. But if you're kind of, you know, if you're in the mood for something that's new and different, it's kind of a funky animation style. It's got, you know, a little Buffy. It's got a little Gravity Falls. It's got a little Scooby-Doo. It's fun and it's worth a watch for sure. If you're kind of, you know, want to scratch that itch of something that's a little bit of that sort of mystery, but overarching mystery, even bigger kind of storyline, I think a lot of people could get behind the Doomies. So yeah, I recommend that one. Check it out.
Yeah, the trailer looks pretty interesting here, and since it's a series, you said it already completed the season. There's no worry, right? You can just binge right through.
Yep. It's all right there for you. So, and again, it's a cartoon series. It's 22 minutes episodes, 24 minutes episodes. They're not a huge commitment either. But yeah, I mean, I've sat down a few times and just sort of popped it on, and I've enjoyed what I've seen so far. I like the characters. They are funny. They are quirky. I think the humor definitely does evoke some feelings of Gravity Falls, but it's not quite as charming. I mean, again, what a bar to set. Gravity Falls is a masterpiece in my opinion, so it's hard to compare. You know, I don't know if we've ever talked about it on the watch list, but if you haven't seen Gravity Falls, go see that. It's incredible. That's also on Disney Plus. And that was a limited run. It was only, I think, 40 episodes for the entire run. It was a cult favorite. People loved it, and the creator Alex Hirsch was like, no, I had a story I wanted to tell. I told the whole story. I'm going to go do something else now. So it's really a very complete story, which is a rarity in animation, to have something that's like you know, nice tight short run but tells an entire story, which is terrific. The other thing I wanted to flag for our watch list is President Curtis opens this weekend on HBO Max. This is a spin-off of Rick and Morty, starring Keith David as the president, the titular president, President Curtis. If you've watched Rick and Morty, you know that there's this very over-the-top president character that has been around, one of Rick's rivals, and also just, you know, somewhere between a thorn in their side and a kick in their pants, just a kind of a funny character. I can't say I've loved every moment that they've had of him and Rick and Morty, but I'm kind of curious to see how they sort of spin it off. The idea is kind of like Abraham Lincoln, a vampire hunter. The idea is that, you know, the president takes matters into his own hand and, you know, it has powers and fights things and stuff like that. So I'm kind of curious to check it out and see if this can kind of carry its own concept forward. I mean, I love Keith David, one of my favorite performers. I think it'll be interesting to see if there's enough there to make this work. But yeah, it could be good. And
the tone is definitely comes out in this trailer. Of the my favorite line was but none of this is in the Constitution. Neither is your mama, but you did what she told you, right? And a lot of people in the comments on this YouTube video are saying like, dude, this is basically Netflix's inside job. Why did that get canceled and this is now exists? I'm like, I don't know. Like, weird things happen. I wouldn't be surprised if the crew making it are very similar.
Yeah, I really liked Inside Job. That was another one that really bummed me out when Netflix canceled that one, because I thought that was a lot of fun. But I'll be curious to check that one out. Following up on last week, I talked about Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. Tim added onto our Slack channel something that we've got stuck in here that's got a bit of a behind the scenes on just sort of the silly ambitiousness of the film that they made. The fact that it is something that's both really, really kind of goofy, but also like some of the shots that they made, some of the ways they filmed it were really kind of interesting. So as a person has done an interview with one of the stars and director, and also with cinematographer, just talking about how they made this movie and just how they really put a lot of thought into making something that is looks very kind of at its surface level, very kind of low production value, low quality, and yet has some pretty crazy good filmmaking involved in it. So highly recommend that if you've had a chance to watch the movie. We'll put a link into the show notes to this YouTube clip. It's pretty fun. All right, Jaime, what you got?
This here is a re-edit of the Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader duel from A New Hope. So unlike the SC-38 reimagining that was CGI, much more prequels style of fighting, this is something that is mostly it's done in the edit. So it uses the original film. It re-edits a bit of the speed, re-edits some of the sounds, and etc. And the premise here is right in the description of like, take the original duel from A New Hope, but make it like it was produced during Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi, where the lightsaber props were made of better materials, where they could go a little bit, more ferocious with the strikes, instead of worrying about, oh man, this thing is breaking constantly, right? Like they had to be a little bit more cautious in A New Hope. And I think it's really well done. I think they didn't add any, flipping around or jumping off walls or anything crazy like that. It is still the original battle, but with a tighter edit, some special effects improvements. And even at the end, he shows kind of the difference between what the original cut looks like versus his own cut. And I think it's pretty solid. It arguably could be a special edition kind of take on it.
Oh, don't say the word special edition. That'll trigger some people.
It's kind of closer to what the special edition should be, right? Of like, oh, we got to clean this up. Oh, there was a boom mic in the corner. Let's use some CGI to get rid of that. Versus, here's a completely unnecessary 1997 CGI standout, swirl around scene. This isn't that. This is quite the opposite.
I saw something today online, and it made me go, hey, wait a minute, that's true. So The Rise of Skywalker 2019 was when The Rise of Skywalker came out. Did you know that that's the last movie that J.J. Abrams made?
For real? Wow.
He has not made a movie since then. So 7 years. He is apparently working on something right now, but he has not made a movie since that abomination. So everybody gets kind of mean on me for not enjoying that film, but I feel like maybe he's been in movie jail for the last 7 years. That's a long stretch for somebody who was prodigious before that.
Wow, that's nuts. I had no idea.
Yeah. I thought, again, it was just something that somebody posted because I guess he's working on something, and they were like, this will be his first movie since 2019's Rise of Skywalker. I was like, wow, that's crazy. There you go. There's your bonus for the watch list. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for another episode of Spotcast. So, hey, Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram as @DevWithAHair.
And you can find me on Instagram. I'm @JPK News. You can find me on I'm @JPK. And if you really want to hang out with us, come join us on our Slack channel. That's where we trade fun, nerdy memes and, and give our feedback on new trailers and all kinds of good stuff. Check that out on our website, spotcast.com. And that'll do it for another week. So we'll see you in the future. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. If you have feedback or questions, you can get in touch with us on the website. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
An absurd amount of tasty but not good for you, beef jerky, potato chips, cookies, vitamin waters, Gatorades, Red Bulls, which I don't do because I I probably have my heart explode at this point. But it's fun to see what people build. But my role there is to support, so it's more sort of on the job than building something myself.
Yeah. I did hackathons with my previous organization. We've never really done anything like that here because it's just a bit removed from that. Although I like how we're able in my last job to sort of spread it so that it was focused on just problems, not necessarily technical solutions, but solutions writ large. I thought that was kind of a fun way to spin a hackathon. But I know Xavier just did one not that long ago with some of his classmates in electrical engineering, and they had some pretty interesting topics. He actually, he and teammates, I think they placed second and got a little bit of scratch out of it, so not too bad.
That's cool.
Speaking of which, it's probably worth mentioning happy birthday to my children who both had birthdays this week. My daughter Faye turned 21, and my son just in a matter of just a few minutes ago turned 23, so very exciting.
Wow, that's the same week, you say? That's
3
2 years apart.
2 years minus 3 days. That is, yes. And for those trying to do the math backwards from mid-July, the answer is Canadian Thanksgiving in October, and we don't know why.
Something in the air.
Turkey, I don't know what it was. Something about the fall weather, I don't know, but yes, but actually, when the kids were both given due dates, when I was given a due date for both kids, it was the same stretch. They were basically a day apart. Was the two due dates? We ended up, and they were actually pretty close because one was almost born on the 15th and one was almost born on the 16th. So they could have been just a day apart. So we missed that window by just about an hour on both sides.
Let me ask a clarifying cultural question about Canadian Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So here in the USA for American Thanksgiving, we have traditionally had 2 NFL games that has expanded to 3 games. So it's like an all-day affair. Is there, I'm going to assume, NHL games that are specific and watched nationally on Canadian Thanksgiving?
Ooh, good question. No. So our with respect to the "it's Thursday, let's have a day off" thing that the Americans do, ours is on a Monday. So it's kind of a long weekend deal for us without the extra day. We don't have the Black Friday in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and because it's earlier, it's mid-October. We have Canadian football that's usually ongoing at that point. So the Canadian Football League will often play games that weekend. And usually there's a couple of games, but there's no sort of traditional, it's not like they always play in Dallas or always play in Detroit. They usually just try and make sure there's a couple of games on during the day within the league. So we get those. And the NHL season's usually only a couple of weeks old at that point. So it's not really, it doesn't really have that same kind of oomph. For the NFL, it kind of has a little more juice because at that point, you're already, 10 weeks into the season. It's got a little more purpose. Not that historically, as a Lions fan, it shames me to say this, but not that it usually mattered what was happening with the Lions by Thanksgiving, but sometimes the Cowboys. But yeah, there isn't sort of an equivalent sporting event correlation. Other than to say, yeah, I mean, it depends on how big a fan you are. I know, I grew up in the Toronto area. We have a football team in the CFL called the Toronto Argonauts. They have a good following, but CFL is not the biggest game in town by any means in Toronto, especially when you have, the Maple Leafs, you have the Raptors, you've got the Blue Jays, and, the last couple of years, the Blue Jays have been in the playoffs in October. So, big doings there. The Argonauts are not a huge deal. But if you go to some place like Regina, Saskatchewan, or even Montreal and some of the other sort of Canadian cities that have teams, Winnipeg, their football teams are very important to their community. A lot of these are towns that have, one or two major sports franchises. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's an NHL team and a CFL team. So there's a lot more interest. There's a lot more civic pride around those teams. And so if you say to people in, Winnipeg or Hamilton or Ottawa, hey, you're going to have, you get to host a game on Thanksgiving, that could be a pretty big deal. If you did that in Toronto, people would be like, okay.
Well, perhaps there might be a divergence in, birth clustering. So I would, hypothesize that Canadian Thanksgiving might have a disproportionate amount of birth clustering come July. Whereas in contrast, I think given that the Americans have a full days worth of NFL games to keep them busy, and then they historically had to go to sleep early because we're going to get up stupid early to go hang out in front of Walmart to get a TV or a DVD player.
Yeah, so there's no correlation there between Thanksgiving and birth rate?
I mean, I don't know, or maybe it's just shifted. Maybe I'm thinking too narrowly about Thursday and Friday, and since it's a long weekend, maybe it's like, okay, we kind of have our weekend on Thursday and Friday, and then get what are you going to do? Oh, nothing on TV.
And also, yes, consider this. So Thursday, you've got Thanksgiving. So Wednesday, travel or cooking, all that kind of stuff. You got that. And then you got the meal and the football on Thursday. You got Black Friday on Friday. But Saturday and Sunday can be pretty chill. And you've already got pre-made meals. Mm-hmm. So maybe you do have a little extra time during that weekend.
Yeah.
All right. Now we're going to be looking up, historical birth rates and related to holidays. Yeah, but no, it's weird. I've always found it weird. I remember trying to start having that realization when I was a kid of being like, wait a minute, we don't have the same holidays, but is Christmas different too? It's just kind of weird how we have same name, different timing and or interpretation. I mean, ours is essentially, they call it Thanksgiving, you can call it whatever you want. It's essentially just a harvest festival for us, right? It's it's the end of the harvest season. It's sort of the last big to do in the fall. I will say I do like the timing of Canadian Thanksgiving over American Thanksgiving, just because I like that it gives you a break in October, because you get Labor Day at the beginning of September, and then for Americans, there's a long gap until the next sort of federal day off kind of deal, right? Like, do you get the Memorial Day? What's the day in do you Remembrance Day? What's the 11th of November for Americans?
So the 11th of November is Veterans Day.
Veterans Day. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have Remembrance Day, which federal employees get that day off. Some provinces recognize it as a day off, but not everybody does. And then also there's a National Day of Remembrance for Indigenous people who were treated horribly by the colonizers here in Canada. That is also in November. So.
Yep, I do think that there's something to be said for reapportioning the holidays and observing them, a little bit more evenly spaced out, so there aren't the big gaps.
Jaime, I think it's time for you to write a letter to your congressman and say, hey, time for us to join Canada and celebrating our Thanksgiving a little earlier. The weather will be nicer. We'll get a nicer break, October versus late November. I always find that weird because I know that Thanksgiving in America is one of those big holidays where people go home, right? People, wherever they've moved to, they're like, oh, I got to go home for Thanksgiving. But it's only 4 weeks before Christmas. Do you not go home for Christmas too?
I have not understood this myself. Why it's specifically the biggest travel day. The only thing I can think of is that you might be explicitly traveling for Thanksgiving for spousal reasons. Whereas Christmas is we're hanging out here, we got the kids, we don't really want to move all the toys and do all this and that. Whereas Thanksgiving, you kind of just need to move people and not stuff.
True.
But I actually don't know. It's baseless speculation. I just know that the pandemic years notwithstanding, every single year is the biggest travel stats ever. Yeah. Because during Thanksgiving, because it's the biggest travel day of the year.
Yeah, I remember just sort of realizing what a big travel day it was at one point. I had some friends who worked in New York City, and they were talking about just the hell that it was getting out of and then back into New York City over that weekend. And yet one of my friends was Hawaiian and lived in New York City. And he's like, I have to go all the way back to freaking Hawaii or my family won't speak to me. And I'm like, that sucks. That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, having to go in and out of either LaGuardia or Kennedy or Newark at any time is a challenge. I can't imagine when everybody wants to do that. That sounds unpleasant. All right. Well, here we are once again. It is well past midnight. I am going to call it a night.
All right.
I will let you know on Slack where we end up with if Tim said that Josh might be able to join me next week, who we had on, I think, a couple times before. But otherwise, either Tim suggested I could either do the show by myself, which sounds really challenging, or we can do a double dip the week after. We can decide how we want to tackle that. It does feel weird to have Stranger New Worlds kind of hanging out there when that's kind of what we do, but it may be unavoidable, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's unfortunate timing. And also, although I've been pretty lucky ever since I got past the two-factor authentication where Tim has to hit a button on his phone or desktop. I'm not sure which one he uses for his two-factor authentication for the Zoom. You will have to make sure you got that set up. Or have him available. Otherwise, he'd be like, hey, let's record. Whoops, we can't. Oh, Tim's at a concert. He's not listening to his phone.
Good point. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, I'll let him know that if we do decide to go forward, then I'll have to figure that out. But if I'm doing it by myself, I don't have to worry about anything. I can just click record and start talking. Tim's comment when I spoke to him was, most episodes are just you talking anyway, so what's the difference? I was like, that's a little hurtful, but all right.
Classic Tim.
That's fine.
Point of view.
That's fine. That's what you would get for having him as just a fan now. He just is going to, take the piss. That's what he's going to do. All right, buddy. Well, safe travels. I will talk to you when you get back.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you next time.
All right. See ya.
Later.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.